Oh, that's the wrong button. Anyway, hey everybody, welcome to the weekly news recap for the 27th to the 2nd of February 2025. Okay, now I press this button. Anyway, so this week we got some news that Forza Horizon 5, or Forza, however it's meant to be pronounced, it's Italian. Anyway, Forza Horizon 5 is coming to PS5 at some stage this spring. Would have originally been an Xbox exclusive. It's developed by Playground Games, I think, and Playground are a Xbox, Microsoft owned company, owned developer. So this is another Xbox exclusive making its way over to PS5 instead. So it's this spring, no specific date. So they have until, I don't know, April, I guess. It will contain all the content available in the Xbox and PC versions of the game. And then previously released DLC and stuff like that will also be available separately. So it's not like a complete package or a definitive edition or whatever. It's like the core game and then the DLC on top of it, which is a bit shit, really. It should be a bundled thing, I think, at this point. It's been long enough, but whatever. At least it is coming across in some way. On top of that, there is some new free content coming to people who already own the game. New free content update called Horizon Realms. Not sure what that is. We'll give players the chance to explore a curated collection of some of the community's favorite previously released evolving worlds, alongside some other surprises. I don't know what that is. I've never played the game. I assume it's like an Elseworld, like challenge map kind of thing, maybe, that was put out while the game was still new. Hard to sure. I'm not really into racing games in the first place, so there's that. The Forza Horizon games are kind of a bit more of like a sandbox kind of thing, like Burnout Paradise a little bit. In that it's just a big map, you drive around it, and there are events kind of dotted about the place. Unlike Forza Motorsport, which is more of a racing game, like you're on racing tracks and everything. Anyway, it's another Xbox game making its way across to PS5. I think it was already on PC. There was an earnings report out this week from Microsoft and Xbox. It kind of shows that they're no more exclusivity thing. You can kind of see why they're pivoting to it. So the Xbox hardware sales, so that's the actual console itself, are pretty down. So they're not selling much of the console, really, but Game Pass subscriptions are up considerably. So them moving, try to get their games on as many platforms as possible. I don't know if we'll ever see Game Pass on PS5, or will it be bundled into PlayStation Plus at some point? Like I don't think that will ever happen. But I also would have thought Xbox exclusive wouldn't make their way across. So maybe. But you do have things like EA Play and Ubisoft's Uplay or whatever. I think it has a new name now. But they're all, they're part of PlayStation Plus. So potentially you might see Game Pass make its way there as well. I think Microsoft would probably push for it just to get it on the console. It's really a case of whether Sony would allow it or not. Anyway, we'll see where that's going. But their strategy of non-exclusivity, going multi-platform with their games, seems like it'll be a better run for them because the hardware side of things isn't really working out for them, which must be pretty shit for people who bought, people who had to make a decision between, do I want a PS5 or do I want an Xbox Series, whatever. They would have seen, here are the exclusive games on Xbox, here are the exclusive games on PlayStation, and I'm gonna have to pick one, basically. And you make the decision that, okay, I'll forgo, I don't know, Spider-Man, Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us, whatever, in favor of Game Pass, convenience and what have you. And I guess that still holds true, but if you were doing it based entirely on the exclusives, you kind of get a bit of a raw deal here. Anyway, moving on. Some new games announced. So Withering Realms, this is from the same developer from is it Withering Rooms, I think, was their original game, which is this kind of side-scrolling, roguelike, survival horror type thing. So it's like procedurally generated dungeons, that kind of thing. So Withering Realms is more of an action RPG, so it's not going to be like a roguelike kind of thing. It's going to be the opposite of a roguelike, a normal game, I guess. You have 3 different characters, or 2 different characters maybe to play as. You have this ghost girl who's also a doll, I think, and she can... You saw there was a puppet at the beginning, so I think she can possess the puppet, I think. Or they are a real person. Maybe they're not a puppet at all. I don't know. So it's kind of leaning into like Whispering Rooms. I forget the name of the original game. That did have these kind of combat mechanics that weren't amazing. It was really more of a case of run away than anything else. But it seems like they want to lean further into the combat stuff for Withering Realms. Anyway, I think that's going to be hitting early access at some stage near the end of this year. Then we have Is This Seat Taken? This is like a kind of cozy game. Kind of deal of it's a... The way to explain this kind of game. So, or these kind of puzzles. You know the kind of puzzles you get where it's like... what order did these people appear in? And it's like... John is taller than Frank, but shorter than... whoever, and this person doesn't want to sit beside this person, and this kind of thing. And you need to figure out, okay, taking all of these things into account, where do I position everybody? And that's the kind of game. That's what it is. I don't know. Like, it's presented in a really nice, fun way, but those kind of puzzles have always broken my brain. So, spatial reasoning is not something I'm good at. Anyway, moving on. Do No Harm is kind of... It's not exactly Papers, Please kind of thing, but it's like a doctor's, what's the word? Diagnosis kind of thing, and then you kind of treat the patient type deal. But it has a kind of eldritch horror element to it. So there are going to be issues where the eldritch horrors are going to want you to not cure the patient or to deliberately infect them with these various things, and it's a case of whether or not you decide to do that, or whether you do no harm and, continue being a doctor and treating everybody, but you're going to slowly go insane. So there's that element to it as well. So you're going to have to manage your own sanity, your ability to cure people versus the horrors kind of thing. I think that's... I forget what the release date for this was now. Pretty sure it's PC only, though. Wish this now. So the start of March, currently on Steam. Moving on. Okay, so kind of a game that you would have expected. This is kind of a no-brainer. It's surprising it hasn't happened before now, but Demio, cross Dungeons and Dragons. Right, it's pretty straightforward. This trailer doesn't really show anything. It's all live action. But Demio, for people who aren't familiar with it, is a tabletop role-playing game. VR game, so you would play it with the idea that you're playing like a miniatures thing, and you would roll dice like virtually and so on. And there is now a non-virtual reality version of it where you're just playing isometric, like little minifigs, and they walk along and kind of thing. But Demio was its own system. It wasn't the Dungeons and Dragons system. It was very close to it, but it wasn't technically, was not legally distinct, was not the Dungeons and Dragons system. Whereas now, I guess they are going to lean more into the Dungeons and Dragons trappings, classes, that kind of thing. Whether or not they'll actually bring the combat system of Dungeons and Dragons across as well, I don't know. Demio was more of a deck building thing instead. So we'll see where that goes. As far as I am aware, it doesn't have a release date. I skipped too far. Pretty sure it doesn't have a release date. No, okay. Anyway, moving on. Phantom Line. So Phantom Line was shown off opening games night, I think. Or opening night live, or whatever that's called. So Phantom Line is Hunt Showdown with a bit of Stalker. So it's 1 to 4 player co-op. You're dropped into this zone that has a bunch of weird shit happening in it. and it's your task to get from point A to point B without dying, collecting loot along the way. I think it's got an extraction thing to it as well, but as far as I'm aware, there's no PvP. But it is expected that you're going to die a lot. One kind of interesting kind of feature of the game is that it's always 4 people, even if you're playing the game solo or playing with 2 people, playing 3 people, whatever. There's always 4 people in your squad, and you jump between characters. So, you know, if you die, you can jump into another body, or if you just find that this particular NPC has better gear, or not better gear, but like, you know, there's the sniper guy, the demolitions guy, whatever. You can spec them out that way instead. So you have your own squad essentially, and you're jumping between them as opposed to you just being one player. So it's got a little bit of not fear. What was the other kind of horror? Clive Barker's Jericho. It's got a bit of that, which also has a body jumping mechanic kind of thing. Wow. I still go back and forth on whether or not that's a good game. Anyway, Phantom Line has a playtest demo available now on PC if you want to check it out. Okay, some kind of less good news. Date Everything has been pushed to a later date. It was going to be coming out in Valentine's Day, which was apropos for a dating simulator, but that's not happening anymore. It's been pushed out to June at some point. There's no specific date, but June anyway. From the lead designer, I was too confident that we could properly test all the wild amounts of content and pathing that exists in this massive game, and unfortunately we ran out of time on our current and yet so appropriate release date. So they're gonna miss Valentine's Day. This is not the first time Date Everything has been delayed. It was supposed to come out end of October last year, and then was pushed to Valentine's Day this year, and then has now been pushed to June. So they're kind of significant delays. It's not like a month or 2 months, because sometimes there's like certificate issues with the consoles and what have you. This speaks of there being a lot more bugs than they were expecting. This isn't always a good thing. I mean, that they're finding them and addressing them, that's good. But that they weren't expecting it is a little concerning. Anyway, Date Everything, if you're not familiar, is a visual novel dating simulator type thing where you date inanimate objects. You know, you date your appliances and stuff like that. And this guy, who's like the general feeling of malaise or something, he's like some kind of existential emotion that I forget the exact thing about him, but it's like not good, more or less. Anyway, so it's been pushed out to June. The free game this week on the Epic Games Store is Undying, which is this kind of zombie... I don't think it's a survival game exactly. Infected by a zombie, handling's days are limited. She must now fight to survive, not for herself but for her son. Ensure Cody's survival. Oh, it's also an escort mission. That doesn't sound great. Search for safety, teaching valuable skills at any cost. I still think it's like more of a combat thing than anything else. Anyway, it's free on Epic right now, and is kind of... It was announced recently that it is getting a console release in the next 2 weeks or so. So it'll be making its way over to PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch soon enough. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the month, which means some of the subscription catalogs are getting refreshed. So PlayStation Plus's monthly games, this is for PlayStation Plus Essential. This is the lowest tier, it's the one required if you want to get online on PlayStation. So it is getting Payday 3, High on Life, and Pac-Man World Repack. Okay, so Payday 3, if you're not familiar, is a co-op FPS bank heist thing. It's you, 1 to 4 players. It, in some ways, could be considered an extraction shooter in that you're extracting money from the bank, but I guess that kind of works. Revel in the thrill of a perfectly planned and executed heist in this high-octane co-op FPS experience. Up to 4 players online, yada yada yada. When Payday 3 launched, it was a bit of a flop. It was quite buggy. People were thinking that it's not that big of a difference from Payday 2. Payday 2 at the time Even when Payday 2 came out, Payday 2 was considered pretty good. I think it was considered good when it came out, and certainly afterwards it was considered very good. And Payday 3, it's I think it sounds like from the community that there was no real reason for Payday 3 other than to just extract more money from people. I don't know if that opinion has changed really in the community. There has been some concern on PlayStation, fan boards and what have you, that there've been 2 live service flops in a row. Suicide Squad was last month, and now Payday 3. Both of them were considered flops, effectively. And is this an attempt to sort of juice their numbers a little bit? Conspiracy-wise? I don't know, maybe. Anyway, High on Life is the Rick and Morty shooter game. Essentially, it's from one of the writers, I think, of Rick and Morty, and it's got those guns that talk to you and won't shut the fuck up. Up to you whether or not you like that kind of thing. I don't know if you like hearing the same joke multiple times because you keep dying past the checkpoint. I don't know, it annoys me. Anyway, moving on. Pac-Man World Repack is it's Pac-Man. 2004 remake of the original PlayStation game. Oh, it's a platformer. Hang on. Pac-Man arrives home on his birthday. Ghosts have kidnapped his family. Pac-Man has a family, apparently. Okay. Pac-Man sets out to Ghost Island, solve puzzles, rescue the Pac fam. Fair enough. And more in this. It's a platformer. Okay. And there are like mazes and stuff in traditional Pac-Man thing, but no, it's more of a platformer type thing. Okay. Fair enough. Weird. Alright. Those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you wanted to play something right now? Well, you can play Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector. So, the sequel to what was a very, very good tabletop RPG in video game form. The original Citizen Sleeper 2, the original Citizen Sleeper 2. The original Citizen Sleeper saw you trying to escape your corporate overlords and hiding out on this space station and trying to blend in with everybody, taking on odd jobs, trying to keep your body from failing and stuff like that. And you would have to make the best of a bad situation because there were dice rolls at the beginning of every day, and the dice kind of determined what you could do, and sometimes they weren't great. Sometimes they were really good. Sometimes they were very bad. And you would just have to make do and try to survive. Citizen Sleeper 2 kind of takes you out of the space station, and you're now on the run on this kind of like cargo ship, taking on smuggling jobs and doing odd jobs and stuff like that, kind of dropping off at space stations, but you can't stay for too long because people will catch up with you kind of thing. So it still has the sort of survival, do your best, make the best of a bad situation. What I've seen from small number of reviews that I've looked at is, yes, it's still very good, but maybe not quite as good as the first game. And, lightning in a bottle is always going to be difficult to pull off a second time. Anyway, still, not quite as good as the first game. Like, the first game was amazing, so that's fine. Anyway, moving on. The Stone of Madness. This is from the developers behind the 2 Blasphemous games, but is not a side-scrolling Metroidvania type thing. Stone of Madness is a stealth sim. So it's an isometric stealth game. You are kind of commanding these, I think it's 5 inmates of this asylum set, I think, somewhere around the Spanish Inquisition kind of times. And you're trying to help all 5 of them escape. And the kind of gist of it is, I think you need to do it all in one go. So you're doing, like preparatory work so that eventually you can all try to escape all at once. But each of your characters have their own different strengths, and they also have their own different weaknesses and fears and things like that. Some of them fear authority. Some of them are just afraid of the dark. Some are afraid of whatever things. So you need to kind of figure out who's the best man for the job or whatever. So yeah, tactical stealth kind of thing. Moving on. Eternal Strands. This was one of the games that was... I'm trying to remember now. I think this is Mike Laidlaw's thing. This is former Dragon Age. And then there's a couple of people I think that were involved in... I think they're ex-Ubisoft, but I'm not sure. Anyway, So this is Eternal Strands. The kind of big thing about Eternal Strands is that it has this interesting physics system, and a lot of the magic behaves physically the way you would expect it to. There are like telekinesis things where you could catch objects that are thrown at you and then throw them back at enemies, freezing things' wings and that kind of thing. Yeah, so this kind of physics system is kind of the big draw of the game. It's also, I think, kind of one of its downfalls, entire like stability. As we've seen from reviews, the physics is a bit jank because of it, because it's relying so heavily on the physics, trying to get enemies to behave the correct way, because you have to do everything like physically accurate as well. You can't like auto target things and expect things to just work out for you. You need to like actually throw the fireball and the correct way to make sure it hits the enemy, kind of thing. Anyway, your mileage may vary. It's obviously just been released. This kind of heavy physics-based kind of games kind of benefit from later patches down the line. Anyway, I'm gonna move on. Sniper Elite Resistance. There's nothing really new here in the Sniper Elite games. Again, reviews-wise, it's another Sniper Elite game. So, like, you know what you're getting. It's kind of jank, but it's fun to shoot, guys in the balls. Get the X-ray thing or the two testicles just explode. I don't think you can shoot Hitler in this one. I don't know which one you can shoot him in, but I think there's DLC on the way where you will be able to. But right now, I don't think you can. Anyway, you get to shoot some Nazis, so, you've got that going for you. Dead Letter Department. Dead Letter Department was part of a couple of different horror game showcases. So the deal with Dead Letter Department is you are working in post office of some kind, or central post office, and this is where all the dead letters go. And the dead letters are basically posts that can't be delivered because the address is fucked up, or for any bunch of other reasons the address doesn't exist anymore, or some other kind of things. And it's your job to digitize them. So you're typing in things that a computer wasn't able to read, so you're typing it in instead. I don't know how a computer couldn't read that, but whatever. But maybe the letters might have a mind of their own. Maybe there's some horrors making their way through the building where all these letters have been left to die, kind of thing. Anyway, that's the kind of gist of it. It is a typing game, though, at its core, so keep that in mind. Moving on. Phantom Brave: The Lost Hero. So these are, the next couple of games are going to be like ports and a couple of remakes and what have you. So this is kind of, it's not exactly a remake of the original Phantom Brave. It is technically a sequel, but it is also kind of a reboot of the original Phantom Brave games. I never played the original. I'm not even sure what console it's on. I think it was on the original PlayStation, but I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, Phantom Brave is kind of a tactics / JRPG kind of thing. From what I have seen of some gameplay, and there's also a demo of it available, it's fun. Doesn't take itself very seriously. It is aimed at a bit of a younger audience, but it's still fun. Bit of a cozy kind of game. Anyway, moving on from there. Spider-Man 2, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is available on PC now. So again, it's another PlayStation game making its way across to PC. From what I have seen, again, it's not a good port. It's a pretty messy port right now. So it might be a case you might want to give this a minute, see if it fixes itself in the meantime. But yeah, I think this, and there were a couple of other, like The Last of Us 2, I think, also didn't have a great PC port, so it does seem that while Sony is kind of, broadening its horizons and making things available on other platforms, it's not doing an amazing job of ensuring that the games play well, so I guess we'll see. Was that fucking symbiote Spider-Woman? I haven't played this, so I don't know. I may have just spoiled a whole lot of shit for myself there. Anyway, and then out of nowhere, these next two games, no one was really expecting it to ever happen. But Dino Crisis 1 and 2 are on GOG right now. GOG Games, as part of the game's preservation thing that GOG has started doing, Dino Crisis 1 and 2. Now, what we really wanted was Dino Crisis 1 and 2 Remake, and we may possibly still get that from Capcom. No, we won't. It's copium. It's Copcom at this point. But, I mean, having them playable on modern PCs is pretty great. I don't know what's going on with the bitrate here. We just have to deal with it. But yeah, the original Dino Crisis 1 and 2, not Dino Crisis 3, for some reason. Probably because it's not good. But even bad games should be preserved. Anyway, Dino Crisis is often described as just Resident Evil, but dinosaurs instead of zombies. And to be fair, it kind of is, but it also has some weird time travel shit going on as well. And Dino Crisis 3 is not great with the time travel kind of thing. Anyway, available now on PC. It's pretty good to see it back. We will probably have to play this on the channel soon. I've never actually played the Dino Crisis games. I've only ever watched them be played. So, you know, I'll have to deal with that at some stage. Another game that no one was really expecting to ever come back, The Sims. Sims 1 and The Sims 2 are now available on PC, all in like classic repackaged form. Again, this is mostly a live action trailer. But it is the original Sims and The Sims 2, all with their DLC, all for an amazing low price of, I don't know, I didn't check. But yeah, on PC, the originals, the classics themselves, and with The Sims 4 being incredibly expensive still, and the DLC also being still incredibly expensive, you know, you might want to go back to the Sims 2 at least. Sims 1 is still a bit rough, but Sims 2 should still be pretty decent. Anyway, speaking of GOG, so GOG have kind of put out this dream list thing, which is available to the community, and it essentially is voting on what should be the next thing to go on the preservation list. So it's going to be a little bit of a popularity contest in a few ways. Code Veronica being high up there is pretty good. No One Lives Forever being pretty high up there too. These are as you can see, GOG's picks. These are the ones that they'd like to see done. I'm not sure what is exactly the most popular one right now. Black and White. Yeah, that would be good to get that out there, alright. But No One Lives Forever, even though it being a GOG pick, is still pretty high up. That's pretty great. Anyway, you can go there yourself, start voting, pick the games you want, and whether or not anything will happen, I don't know. But it is a way for GOG to show that, you know, they can go to the publisher and be like, hey, people really want your game back. Whether they'll listen or not, who knows. Anyway, unfortunately though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games, the video game industry. So we're going to start with EA doing an EA. Classic EA, and killing off studios very, very slowly. So Bioware is next up for the EA graveyard. By the looks of things, it has been slowly kind of trimmed, we'll say, over the years, and is now getting a pretty significant death blow, in my opinion, but I guess we'll see how it works out for them. So Bioware betting it all on Mass Effect 5 after even more layoffs. So who knows what's left of Bioware now? It's the developer behind things like Mass Effect, but also Dragon Age, Knights of the Old Republic, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights. Lots of really, really good single player, really strong story games, that kind of thing. Anyway, who knows? There's been a lot of layoffs and restructuring done at BioWare over the years. That whole thing with Anthem was obviously not a great move for them, and that wasn't necessarily the beginning of the end. The beginning of the end was them being bought by EA. Let's be honest. That was the real beginning of the end. But Anthem was certainly not helpful, and I think what happened with Anthem really lost them a lot of power with EA. I think EA more or less just took over at that point. Anyway, the only thing that seems certain is that the studio's entire fate feels like it's riding on Mass Effect 5, a game that's still a very long way off. So the studio has completely moved on from Dragon Age: The Veilguard, as is focused entirely on the next Mass Effect. We do know that because they've effectively said they are no longer supporting Dragon Age: The Veilguard, so they're very quickly washing their hands of that, which is not a good sign. They've lost a lot of their core team, a lot of veterans, a lot of people who have worked on Mass Effect as well, which is a really weird one to lose. Like, you would think you'd want to keep those people around, especially when they've been trying to like tell the community and fans that Mass Effect 5 will be like a return to the original, the 1, 2, and 3. It's not even clear if it's going to still be called Mass Effect 5, because there's no Mass Effect 4. It's Mass Effect Andromeda. It's not Mass Effect 4 Andromeda, so depending on whether or not they'll call it that. Anyway, General Manager Gary McKay trying to, cool the fires on the community forums or what have you. But talking about why all these layoffs that they're not calling layoffs, even though there definitely are layoffs. Given this stage of development, we don't require support from the full studio. We have incredible talent here at Bioware, so we have worked diligently over the past few months to match many of our colleagues with other teams at EA that had open roles that were a strong fit. So, some of the developers who worked on Dragon Age: The Veilguard have been moved to other EA studios. It hasn't been stated which EA studios. Have they been thrown into the battlefield mines? Probably. That'd be my guess. It's not clear if when Mass Effect development ramps up, will they be coming back to Bioware, or are they now like permanently reassigned to a different studio? It seems that the latter is more likely, because it does feel like EA are looking to shutter Bioware, to be honest. Because of these last series of steps. So last year, Bioware got rid of Star Wars The Old Republic, gave it to a different developer, laid off a ton of staff that were essentially maintaining the game. A few months after that, they laid off another 50 employees, a lot of veterans. Again, they were trying to get Mass Effect back to its original form, and you would get rid of veterans for doing that. It's probably not the best time. Anyway, that left them with about 200 people-ish. And now with Veilguard, the developers from Veilguard disappearing, they're probably like down to less than 100. EA, you're not sharing numbers. The studio has the right number of people in the right roles to work on Mass Effect at this stage of development, which is early development, which, yes, you don't need that many people for that kind of thing. But you still want to keep those people around, because when you do ramp up, you want to be in a position where you have people who know what they're doing and aren't coming in fresh. And the usual way to get around that was DLC. You would have the team who were working on Dragon Age: The Veilguard. You'd have a smaller team of them work on DLC or an expansion or something. Another part of the team would work on support for the game. And then the other half, or the other whatever portion we have left, would go to previs on whatever the next game is. Or pre-production, or whatever. Go help on that side of things. And instead, they've shifted them off to like a completely different studio to work on who knows what. Instead of putting out some DLC for Dragon Age: The Veilguard or something like that. Like, it's not great management. But at the same time, I don't think they're intending to do great management here, because I don't think EA wants to keep Bioware. Anyway, we'll see. There was an update later on from Bloomberg to confirm the numbers. So Bloomberg reports the studio now has fewer than 100 employees after dozens were laid off, and dozens more were permanently moved to other EA studios. It doesn't sound like they're going to be coming back. The cuts included veteran staff like writer Trick Weeks, who worked on Mass Effect and Dragon Age for decades. So again, it's not a great look when they're getting rid of their veteran developers, and also trying to make it sound like Mass Effect 5 will be a good deal. Yeah, it's not looking good for Bioware. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of not looking good, Ubisoft kicks off bid to maximize value creation by laying off everybody. So, Ubisoft is laying off almost 200 workers and closing its studio in Leamington in the UK. So the entire 50-person team at Leamington is gone. And then on top of that, there's a bunch of layoffs happening in Dusseldorf, Stockholm, and Newcastle. This is going to be affecting developers who've worked on Tom Clancy's The Division, some of the Far Cry games, Grow Home, The Crew, the driving game. As part of our ongoing efforts to prioritize projects and reduce costs, so you're certainly reducing costs by firing everybody. All right, anyway, This update is that some employees from the Lemmington studio are going to be retained on remote contracts. It's a possibility that they already knew that, or Ubisoft let them go and then realized, oh, actually, no, we need them. they're kind of important. So they're going to be retained on their remote contracts, but are not. Who knows how long they'll actually be kept on for. So we do know that Ubisoft is looking to sell, and either going to try to sell themselves to Tencent, who already have a pretty decent share of Ubisoft, and then it'll essentially be Tencent and the Gimo family will re-privatize Ubisoft. Right now it is publicly traded, so the idea is that Tencent would buy out remaining stock and then gift it to the Gimo family. So I don't think they're going to do that part. But that is what they want anyway. So they're trying to, cut costs and make the thing more attractive and cheaper and what have you. Anyway, certainly not how you make good games, is by getting rid of the people who make those games. Anyway, speaking of, Phoenix Labs lays off majority of workforce, and by majority you can mean pretty much everybody. So Vancouver-based developer Phoenix Labs has laid off the majority of its staff. Coming from a LinkedIn post, this is part of unfortunate but necessary changes to its operations. You'll find out now exactly how necessary these changes were. So Phoenix Labs are the developers behind Dauntless and Fae Farm. This is just the latest in a series of layoffs and downscaling of the company. Last May, 140 employees were reportedly let go from the developer, and according to former principal engineer, Phoenix Labs was acquired by a blockchain platform called Forte over a year ago, which has cancelled all projects in development. So a necessary change because blockchain shit isn't working. Anyway, necessary change because we cancelled all projects. Despite this being a video game studio who makes video games, and you decided to cancel all of them. Makes sense. Anyway, this is another private equity pump and dump thing. Moving on. Okay, another live service joins the trash heap. So Warner and DC smash them up. Multiversus joins the pile of dead live service games. So, end of May of this year, Multiversus will no longer be playable online. If you already own it at the time, you will still be able to play the game offline. And there is, I think they are adding in, either it already exists or they're adding in local multiplayer. So it has already, sorry, not yet. It will be pulled from Steam, the Epic Games Store, PlayStation, Xbox, and so on at the end of its next season. Next season will be starting the 4th of February. Not sure when it ends exactly. But yeah, you will still be able to fight bots and play offline local multiplayer after that. But any real money transactions have been suspended as of today. You don't see a lot of live services don't do that. When they announce they're sunsetting it, they keep the real money thing going, which is shitty because not everybody reads these press releases and what have you. But at least they have done that, so that is actually a good thing. So you won't be able to, put your money into a dying game. You still have a little bit of time to spend whatever premium currency, if you do have any of it, that kind of things. But one kind of interesting thing, and potentially might be an issue down the line, but you'll need to install /download the latest version of the game and log in during Season 5 to make sure you can still play it offline. Which is a bit weird. Entirely sure why they're doing it that way. Why do you have to log in for the season? Why isn't it just a case of you using your... So I think the case of it is that when you log in, it makes an offline save. But why you can't do that anyway, I don't know. It's a bit shit, really. So PSA, if you do ever want to think you might want to play it offline, make sure you log in after the 4th of February, but before the 30th of May. Anyway, it's not clear what this will mean for the developers Play First Games. They were acquired by Warner Brothers last year because they were working on Multiverses. They wanted to bring them in-house, and now they're probably going to shutter them. This is Warner Brothers video game output lately has not been great. they kind of accidentally had a hit with Hogwarts Legacy, I think. I don't think they were expecting it to do quite as well as it did. And now their expectations for other games have been way too high because of that. They're expecting to accidentally have another hit on their hands, but they're expecting it, which is not the best move, really, from a business standpoint, but here we are. Okay. So more on the games journalism side of things. Entire God is a Geek editorial staff walk out, cut ties with its alt-right founder. So this is kind of news that the owner of God is a Geek, whose name I won't mention, did a Nazi salute at an event last week. Now, allegedly, it was because, I was just making a mockery of people going nuts about Elon Musk's Nazi salute, but you still did a fucking Nazi salute, guy. Fuck you, right? And, well, the entire editorial staff of God is a Geek seems to agree. They're also saying, fuck you, we're done. The Anglican Church, who he's with, also said, fuck you. It's impressive. That's impressive. Okay, anyway. So, allegedly, he's no longer part of the site's editorial team in the first place, but is still the owner, and they basically don't want to be associated with him anymore. They've put up with it up until this point, and would argue why you've decided to put up with it up until this point. From their point of view, they were kind of putting up with his shit because they wanted to keep their work, and they worked really hard on the site, and they wanted to keep the access they had gotten from working on the site and so on. But I guess this is too far for them. We have each of us put years of work into the site, attempting to keep entertaining despite the actions of our estranged owner. His input on the site has been zero for several years, but we cannot continue to say nothing. To be absolutely clear, we do not support, share, or condone that guy's politics or actions. As a result, the entire editorial team will be stepping down with immediate effect. We will create a new site, and our future content will be published there, bereft of any connection to shithead. It will be hard to start again, hard to walk away from the work we've done here, off our own backs, but this is the right thing to do. You might argue it was the right thing to do a while ago, but okay. Yeah, so what that ends up being, to start from scratch, you're somewhat starting from scratch. I mean, some outlets will have a relationship with God is a Geek as a monolith, but a lot of PR people, a lot of publishers, a lot of developers, other journalists and whatever, they have the relationship with the person, not really with the company. So I don't think they're going to be quite as bad off as they think. I think it'll work out okay for them. But yeah, good that they're, taking a stand, because fucking nobody else is taking a stand on it. Anyway, moving on. Some better news for People Can Fly. So Bulletstorm and Painkiller devs People Can Fly to co-develop Gears of War E-Day following spate of layoffs and cancellations last year. So should probably go without saying, but People Can Fly had a really shit 2024. Really shit 2023 as well. So things are looking up for them here a little bit. So People Can Fly will be co-developing Gears of War E-Day, which is this somewhat soft reboot of the Gears of War series. And kind of helpfully, they've worked on the series before. They worked on Judgment Day. So yeah, last year People Can Fly, they had a pretty bad year. Layoffs, 30 people, 20 people were removed from an unannounced project, and they canceled a different project. Then at the end of last year, 120 workers shelved. Things weren't working out too well for them. So hopefully this will see a bit of a turnaround for them. Okay, so this is sort of a good news, bad news kind of thing. So Sony finally sees sense, making it optional to sign in to PSN account for single-player games, but not for all of them. So months of complaints, people saying like, why do we need this PSN sign-in thing? It doesn't do anything for the games. It's not necessary. It just seems an onerous power grab, basically, by Sony. So they're removing the requirement for some single-player games, not all single-player games. Has been forcing players to use their PSN accounts to sign in, and that has been essentially making it impossible for people who want to play the game, want to buy the game in territories where the PSN doesn't exist. So Steam is available pretty much everywhere. And there is this issue of, like, what's it called? price tourism, I guess. You set your territory to different places in the world to try to get the game cheaper. And there was an idea that Sony was doing this to avoid that, basically. So they were setting it so that you could only play the game in areas where the PSN exists, which are not typically better off, we'll say. But what it really means is the prices are much higher for their games. So locking out millions of potential players from buying the game at all. I don't think it locks them out from buying the game, but it certainly locked them out from playing the game because they wouldn't have had a PSN account. So you could give Sony your money, but you wouldn't be able to play the game. Anyway, they are removing the requirement from a couple of different games. So the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster, God of War, Last of Us, Spider-Man. Mostly you'll notice all single-player games. Helldivers 2, I think, is still optional just because there was such a fucking stink about it. And they tried to bring it in after the fact. Until Dawn, for some reason, doesn't. Not sure why. I guess because it technically has a multiplayer component to it, but it's still a weird one to require the PSN ID. But anyway, maybe they're seeing the light here. I don't know. If you do decide to use the PSN sign in, they will be like special unlocks and stuff like that. But from the sounds of it, they're not exactly super enticing. Spider-Man, if you decide to sign in, you get like an early unlock of some of the costumes. God of War, I think you get some currency or something. Not sure. But their whole reasoning for the PSN thing originally was security and safety of our players for multiplayer and stuff like that, which is quite clearly bullshit because nothing has changed and now they're taking the requirement away. Like it was quite obviously on its face bullshit at the time, and well, now it has been shown to be bullshit anyway, right? Anyway, moving on. Stuff happening in the community. Square Enix condemns Final Fantasy XIV's stalking mod. So I've been thinking about getting into Final Fantasy XIV again as part of the Fully Plays Final Fantasy series thing. We are going to have to start Final Fantasy XIV at some point because it is such a big game. So I came across this mod that feels really awful, and I don't know why anyone would develop it, but okay. So there's this mod, Player Scope, which is accused of tracking players across characters without consent. So the idea with Player Scope is you would be able to use this third-party tool, which would give you some information about the player's ID, and you would then be able to use that ID to correlate it with other characters. So you're only getting a little bit of the ID, you're not getting the whole thing. So you're potentially getting false positives here, and false negatives, whatever. But the idea is you'd be able to see what other characters a player has, and potentially other data about that player. For Square Enix's part, they have said that there's no access to sensitive data. Like none of that is available through the player's player ID. Like that's on a different thing. You wouldn't be able to access that. So you wouldn't be able to access stuff like the payment details, addresses, that kind of thing. You wouldn't get that kind of information. So what information you are getting is not entirely clear, just which other characters they have, maybe what servers they're on, that kind of thing. It's certainly a huge avenue for harassment. People make a new character to get away from shitheads, and then the shitheads follow them. And then the other side of things is, I guess, you deliberately, I don't know if you could block other players, but you block this other character and then they make a new character to get around it. I don't know. Anyway, according to IGN, the only way to opt out of having your information scraped is to join the tool's private Discord channel. So you need to join the enemy, effectively, if you don't want your data scraped. Not everybody's going to know about this mod. They effectively are able to scrape everybody's data. So you would hope Square Enix have some way of blocking the mod. I don't know. Sounds like maybe not. But it's pretty shit. And at least they've come out to say that, it's not a good thing. But I can't think of why this would be a good thing to have. And not just an avenue for harassment. Anyway, I don't see how this is a benefit to the community. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of not a benefit to the community, modder behind Bloodborne 60 FPS patch finally DMCA'd by Sony. 4 years later, they fucking took their time getting to him. So 2021, Lance McDonald modder He made a custom patch for the PlayStation 4 Pro that allowed Bloodborne to run at 60 FPS. 4 years later, Sony decides to get around to issuing a DMCA takedown, which he has complied with. Like, doesn't really have a legal leg here anyway. So I've received from Sony Interactive Entertainment asking that I remove links to the patch I posted on the internet. I've done so. Why Sony decided to target him after 4 years? Any number of reasons. Maybe they literally just got around to it. Maybe they have a Bloodborne thing on the way. That would be copium. Really, I don't think they do. I feel like this is more a case of legal finally just actually noticed. Why bother in another way? Because this requires like a rooted PS4 Pro. Not everybody has access to, and it's certainly also not something that's easy to do. And precludes you from playing a lot of other PlayStation games. You're having to take a significant monetary loss here, essentially, to play Bloodborne at 60 FPS. So why bother in going after it for a DMCA at this point? I don't know. The nice way to think about it is maybe Sony's planning something soon with Bloodborne. But the other thing to think about it is it's almost certainly just legal. Finally got around to doing it. Anyway, we'll leave Citizen Sleeper to loop in the background. Anyway, that is your news for the 27th to the 2nd of February 2025. 27th of January to the 2nd of February 2025. Yeah, not a whole lot going on. It's pretty quiet week. Bioware looking like it's going to join the EA graveyard. I think it's been a while since EA put something in the graveyard, you know? Guess they were due. Putting all of their developers onto... It's kind of interesting, and by interesting I mean shit, that they would force Bioware into making a game that they really weren't suited to doing. Now I say force, there's a bit of an, EA, both EA and Bioware are somewhat to blame for Anthem going in a live service direction. Bioware thought they could do it, they wanted to do something different, but as it turns out, no. They were better suited to single player games. But even when they go back to doing that, it's clear EA don't really have any interest in single player games anymore. You know, they want Battlefield and they want EA football, and that's kind of it. So it's hard to see EA keeping Bioware at this point. Now, whether they sell them off or allow Bioware to buy themselves out or just shut the whole studio down, I don't know. But I feel like that's where we're going, to be honest. Well, they do have like a strong IP with Mass Effect. There hasn't been a new one in a long time, and if they've seen that, Dragon Age, which they also would have thought would have been a strong IP, Dragon Age the Veilguard didn't do well, sales-wise, and that's resurrecting an IP that people were looking for. And Mass Effect 5 is resurrecting an IP people are looking for. Potentially, they're expecting this also won't do as well. Potentially, they're starting to cut their losses already with Bioware. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation. We don't really know what's going to happen with them. What else we were talking about? What fucking else even happened this week? I was just talking about it and I don't remember. Yeah, Ubisoft starting to try to make themselves look more palatable to everybody. The Phoenix Lab blockchain thing, I mean, that was on its way. Multiverses, another live service on the trash heap. Like, do you think the industry will get the memo now that maybe cool it with the live service stuff? Maybe wait a bit. Maybe don't have everybody try to do the same thing all at once. Maybe take your time. No, money now. Number go up now. Anyway, some other news that I don't think really warranted a whole article or talking about it. The Video Game History Foundation's archive is now available. It's still somewhat in a beta early access thing, but you can check out like old magazines and old ads and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. We talked about it last week, but it's now officially open. Sony's co-CEO situation has resolved itself, I forget the name of the guy who's been put in charge of Sony now, but Sony does have a proper CEO now, and Herman Hulst has been left in charge of Sony's worldwide studios and Sony Interactive Entertainment, so PlayStation, essentially. At the time, there was like a co-CEO thing where he was also somewhat in charge of bigger Sony, where they were co-doing it until they could figure out who was going to take the place of the departing CEO, which they had now done. So his co-CEO at the time is now de facto CEO, and Herman is... not sure if it's a demotion, to be honest. I don't think it's meant to be billed as a demotion, but he's not CEO anymore. Like, anyway, maybe he never was. I don't know. I'm not sure what the official wording of position was. Caretaker CEO or something like that. Anyway, there's no major change. That's why I didn't bother bringing it up. Anyway, what's happening on the channel? Nothing, really, to be honest. Off stream, I've been playing Wolfenstein. More Wolfenstein. So I've been working my way through the Wolfenstein series. So I played the New Order, and then I played the DLC standalone thing, The Old Blood. And now I've moved on to Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, which is a sequel. I liked it. I like the New Colossus. The story, anyway, and when it sticks to the story, it's really good. Moves at a decent clip. Some really interesting set pieces. There's some reuse of set pieces that I think were done better in the first game. I'm not entirely sure how this is a Wolfenstein. Oh, right, the dog. Okay, alright, anyway. What was I going to say? The side content is so grindy. Like, I really didn't like that at all. So there's a side content thing in... This game's old enough, I can talk about it, right? There's a side content in Wolfenstein 2, where you need to, like, track down commanders out in the field. But it is essentially you just replaying maps that have, like, a different configuration, different layout of enemies and what have you, but you're just replaying the maps. There's no checkpointing on any of those maps, and some of them can get quite big, you know, and they don't drop you in the area where you're meant to find this special commander. You have to work your way towards them, and you can easily die before you get there, especially if you're playing on a harder difficulty. And it's just grindy. It's just really grindy, and I don't know why it was never incorporated into the main game. Like, they got rid of the ability to replay missions. So the only way you could go back into these areas was essentially to do these separate commander-based missions. I forget what they're called. Uber commanders or something like that. I just thought that was really... I get the idea of it. I get the idea of you, like, trying to, you know... Like, the whole point of the New Colossus is trying to jumpstart a revolution in occupied United States, like Nazi-occupied United States. And the idea of you going back into these areas and taking out, like, the chain of command and stuff like that, that's interesting from a narrative standpoint, but it never really plays into the narrative. Like, it's quite obviously a separate thing to the story. And that was kind of shit, you know? It really should have been incorporated into the main story itself. And the grindy in the sense that it costs, like, a currency to start these missions. You need to find Enigma codes out in the main game, which is taking down commanders in the main game, and they have Enigma codes that they drop, and then you do a puzzle thing, and then you can go there. But it costs, like, 2 Enigma codes to start this mission, or 8 Enigma codes when you get further into it. And you're not going to have enough of these codes just by playing the game. Like, you'll have to do these side missions a couple of times to have enough Enigma code, especially if you fuck up the puzzle, because it eats an Enigma code if you fuck up the puzzle. And I lost a couple of Enigma codes doing that because it is not obvious how to solve the Enigma codes puzzles. Like, it has a tutorial and everything, and it's like, I still don't understand. Anyway, so you say that the tutorial is just written down. Like, it doesn't take you to a step-by-step version of the puzzle, which I think it should have. Anyway, going back to the good parts, though, the story's really good. They do reuse the go to space trope from the first game. Mission. And I just think it was done better in the original game. I think a lot of things were done better in the original game, but I still like the New Colossus. The set pieces are good. Setting it in the US is a little bit more interesting. Because having like Nazi occupied Germany in the first game is like, yeah, obviously, but having it somewhere else is kind of good. Like political commentary, and a little bit it is very fucking apropos of today as well, which isn't great. Anyway, I'm considering Youngblood, which is the DLC for New Colossus. When I went to download it in the store, though, it had like, and then also like €5 for a gold pack, like a currency purchase thing. That made me feel really iffy about playing the game. So if it's like a big grind fest, so much of a grind fest that you need to like spend real money to get past it, I'm not really into that. So if anybody has played Youngblood and knows differently, let me know. Otherwise, I'll probably play something else. There is also a VR Wolfenstein, which is not a first-person shooter for some reason. I don't know why. It's like fucking tailor-made for it, but whatever. Co-pilot, cyberpilot, something like that. Anyway, I think it's a PC only thing at the moment. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, in the meantime, until somebody tells me otherwise about Youngblood, I'm gonna go play Blood Dragon. I'm still kind of in the mood for a first-person, somewhat stealth, somewhat shooter hybrid thing, and like the Far Cry games are essentially that, but I don't want to play like a giant Far Cry game, so I'm gonna play Blood Dragon instead. I've never played Blood Dragon. I've always heard really good things about it. It seems like it's just like a bonkers thing, like the Wolfenstein story is kind of insane. Like, if the Blood Dragon is much the same, yes, I'm here for it. I don't know how stealthy the game is exactly, and I do prefer stealth as overall. If you're giving me the option of stealth or shooter, just stealth, really. And I think I've said before about first-person shooters in general, that if the only thing you've got going for you is the shooting, I'm not interested. Like, you need to give me something else. You need to give me some other gimmick. Like, I'm already kind of on the fence with Bioshock, and the only thing that Bioshock has going for it is that story and like the plasmids. Like Bioshock Infinite, I was real like, I actually don't like the gameplay at all. I was there only for the story. Anyway, we'll see how Blood Dragon gets on, but it's not going to be as long as like a big Far Cry game, and that's kind of really what I was interested in. Has anyone played Primal? The like Far Cry Primal, the caveman one. Is that good? I'm kind of curious about it. Anyway, these are all on the PlayStation Plus catalog. This is kind of why I'm playing them in the first place. Anyway, we'll see how I like Blood Dragon. But that is it from me for today. Possibly. I may be back later on. I do have guests over, but I suspect they won't be here all day. So, wow, Remember Me is in this trailer. Fucking crazy. Anybody remember that game? Oh, all right, anyway, I'm going to go. Have a good rest of your day, and I may be back later with something. I don't know yet. Anyway, have a good one. Bye.